Hey, I'm Deidre Detterman, host of the Do It My Way podcast, where we empower women business owners and CEOs to do business on their terms with no regrets, hesitation, or fear. I'm obsessed with all things marketing. I started my career in television, and I remember sitting in countless meetings, listening to executives talk about things that needed to change, but they never did. I was always thinking, what if we did it my way? Once I became an entrepreneur and I started living life on my terms, working the hours I want to work, making the money I want to make, I started to feel success. I was finally in control of my destiny. I hope you will join me on this journey discovering how you can do it your way. You're going to love my next guest. She is quoted saying, "The best solutions come from people who have sat in more than one seat." That is absolutely Anna America. You're going to love her story coming up next. Well, Anna, I am so excited to have you here today. So thank you for being here.
I'm very excited to be here. I'm looking forward to it.
So Kathy Taylor was on my podcast, and she gave me a list of names. These are Tulsa women that you have to interview that are incredible. And so we started doing the research, and I know I've met you a couple of times around Kathy, and I started looking at everything, and I cannot believe what all you've done. I mean, the fact that you've worn so many hats in so many different areas, and now, you know, working for the city, it's absolutely incredible. So I want you to kind of share a little bit about your journey. But first, you started college at age 15.
Yes.
And I read that and I thought, okay, my maturity level at 15 or my kids' maturity level wasn't even there. So walk me through that journey of how you started.
Well, you know, it was interesting that I had a kind of pretty chaotic childhood. I was one of 7 kids. By the time I was 15, I think I had moved 16 times. I counted for some presentation, and we were pretty poor. My dad worked in construction or worked as a restaurant, whatever he picked up as a job. My mom was a waitress and later cleaned houses, and he was always chasing dreams. So we moved around a lot. And but one thing that he was really good at, he believed in me and all his kids, but he just was like, "Oh, you're so smart. You can do anything. You're so accomplished." And so when I was 14, which was, I think, the earliest age you could do it, he made me take a Mensa test and entered, and I passed and was in Mensa, and had me take an SAT test. And, you know, he's this blue collar construction guy. We lived outside of Chicago. And he took these test scores and walked into Roosevelt University and said, "My kid's too smart for regular school, and they don't know what to do with her. You guys should take her." And they did. So I started college at Roosevelt University at age 15. And I think it was the first time for me, it was the first time that I sort of realized, I mean, in this kind of crazy, chaotic life that I'd had, that, oh, I had some agency there, that like me and my accomplishments actually could change those things. I wasn't just, you know, a twig on floating along wherever the current took me, but that my accomplishments were part of what was going to determine what was going to happen to me. So that was...
And it didn't matter where you came from. It's like everybody's at the level playing field going into college, you know?
Yeah, although I would say for me, it also, I mean, kind of the flip side of that was sort of negative. It was the first time I really did realize I was pretty different, that I was younger, and that was a factor, but also just that I had not had a lot of the experiences that other people had. I mean, I didn't have a best friend down the street or go to slumber parties or participate in sports. And I was people were very different, came from all different kinds of backgrounds in college, of course, but most of them had some common shared experience, and they'd been to high school, and I did not learn how to drink beer with, peers behind the stadium. I mean, the first time I had something to drink, I probably shouldn't admit this, but yeah. I mean, I was 15, and that's one of the things. You're a 15-year-old girl
in an adult world,
and you look. I mean, a 15-year-old girl passes as an adult, so people treated me as if I were one of them, and I knew I wasn't. And I went to some party, and people just handed me. I had never had a drink of alcohol, and I mean, thank God I was around people who protected me, because I just like passed out an hour later. So I didn't know how to navigate a lot of the things around me. But you figure out that sometimes you just kind of grit your teeth and keep going, and then you get through it. So I do think that starting college at that age, sort of the two sides of that, it helped me really start kind of owning a role in my own life, but also understanding that there are a lot of things that you can't control, and that sometimes you just push your way through them and get to the other side.
So college back then too, it's in person. Like it's different today. You start college at 15, you go online, you take a couple courses. It's like you were going physically into class.
It's now as with many things that we look back at our childhood and you think, oh my God, how did I do that?
Right.
But I mean, here I was 15. We lived outside in a sort of suburban area outside of Chicago. I'd get on the bus or the train every day, ride the train into downtown. Roosevelt University is down on Michigan Avenue, downtown Chicago, and wander around Chicago as a 15-year-old girl. And I think I would never have let my daughter do something like that.
Well, I think we all, because it was like you just left the house and I'd be home at dark, and my mom never knew where I was. You know, they didn't know where you were. Times have definitely changed, but I bet your maturity level had to just step it up immediately. You had to grow up. Like you were immediately growing up.
Yeah, it was,
to be in that environment.
I struggled some because, for one thing, because I'd had this very atypical schooling too, you know. I mean, I never went a whole year in a school, and we moved a lot, and so I would always be in advanced programs, and which when I was there, just they'd put you in advanced English or something, and so like, oh, we did poems. I had never written a paper of any kind. I did not know. I had not had any grammar lessons, and they put me in this advanced English class, and they go in with this 12 books, and it's like, oh, and I was a great reader and I was a good writer. Mm-hmm. But I didn't know any of the technical things. And they said, we're going to write 12 research papers. And I was like, okay. And so I never went to that class again. And I didn't tell anybody that I freaked out and didn't go to that class. Yeah. I got an F in that class. And it wasn't until like the next semester that I was kind of brave enough to go up and say, like, I actually don't know how to do everything, you know, and be willing to kind of have people kind of help me navigate that and walk through it. And
then the crazy thing about that is then you became a journalist.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So talk about writing becoming a skill. I mean, working for the Tribune.
We moved here to Tulsa when I was 16. So I went for a year at Roosevelt, and then I went a little bit at then Tulsa Junior College, TCC. Mm-hmm. And my first paper that I wrote for an English class there, Kathy Payton, I still remember her name, one of the few teachers that really had an impact. And I get this, and I knew I was a good writer. I mean, I was always one of the things that my dad would do when I was younger. If I got in trouble, I had to write a paper about it. So at a young age, he'd like, okay, well, you write and tell me why you think you shouldn't be in trouble or what the punishment should be or whatever it was. And I wrote this wonderful paper, I thought, turned it in. I'm 16 years old now, and it just comes back just covered in red. And I had made apparently like 30 comma splices. And I took the paper up to her afterward, and I said, I don't know what a comma splice is. Help me. Mm-hmm. And she was great. And so she asked a little bit, kind of heard my story, and I think was one of those people. I've been so blessed throughout my life, just have these people who kind of say, oh, this kid doesn't know what she's doing, but she's got talent, and we're going to help her. And so she got me some books, took some time out of class. And it's one of the reasons I probably became a journalist and kind of became fanatical about certain kinds of punctuation and copy editing and things. I've never made a comma splice error since then.
That's so great.
But yeah, because I mean, probably, I don't know that I internalized the lesson of both of those things, but of being willing to go up and ask for help and say, I don't know this. I want to know this. Mm-hmm. Help me, because almost always somebody will.
That took a lot of bravery. I mean, at your age to do that in front of the class. And the teacher probably loved it, because most students are like, don't care, leaving, trying to get out of there. So the fact that you showed some initiative that young and not to be intimidated to walk up there is a big deal.
Yeah. She ended up being a teacher who really helped, write references for me and things later on, and help me do other things. So
was Tribune your first job out of college?
Yeah, my first real job. I was editor of the newspaper at University of Tulsa.
Okay.
And
so TJC to University of Tulsa.
And then went to TU. And TU was another. I mean, at 16, I ended up, then you could get a list of colleges out of the almanac, got an almanac and a typewriter and wrote letters to like 40 colleges across the country and just said, hey, I'm smart. And honestly, I didn't know if they were good schools or not. I'd like heard of them.
Right.
And I think you'd be a good school and I should go there. And I actually got, as a 16-year-old writing my letter on my typewriter, a full ride scholarship to Wellesley. But I chickened out. I mean, I was 16 and then once I got it, I thought, I don't know if I could do that. So I walked into the University of Tulsa admission office with some papers in hand and said kind of the same thing. I said, I'm smart and I don't have any money and I want to go here. And how do I do that? And as with many things, you kind of look back and you think, oh my God, somebody didn't just kick me out. But some admissions person was like, hey, come back here, and sat me down and walked me through. This is what you do. We want you here. This is how you fill out paperwork. This is how you apply for financial aid.
And your parents aren't with you. You're just literally walking in as a 16-year-old. And at this point, my dad had left. And so my mom was, she's here with all these kids, cleaning houses for a living. So you're on your own.
My own, and just kind of walked in and again, had somebody who was willing enough and just saw some talent and got me in. And so I went to TU and graduated. And
did you get a full ride?
I got it was enough. I graduated with like $1,000 in student loan.
Oh,
so I know, which even then was nothing. Now I kind of had an experience that wasn't like most of the other students, honestly. I worked the whole time. I didn't have enough money for the books, so I would get the list of books. I'd go to the library, see if I could check them out, keep them for the semester. One semester I ended up having to copy the whole book because I figured out it was small enough I could get 2 pages, and it was 5 cents a page, and that was cheaper than buying a book. And I worked multiple jobs to get through. To me, college I was not a social or other experience like that. It was a tool to be able to be successful and get a job. And I knew I could write, so I took journalism classes, and I wasn't really brave, and I wrote something, and my teacher said, the school newspaper would publish that. I was like, well, not me. They're not going to publish me. And so I slid it under the door at like night. I was too embarrassed to even hand, and they're like, oh yeah, we want more. And I wrote a story about a kid that the house where my mom worked, and a teacher said, you should submit this to the World Sunday paper. And I was like, and I did kind of the same thing, like got it in and just like left it in the middle of the night on a table, and they published it. And I took a class with Jenk Jones Jr., another one of the people who kind of have helped me through the years, who at that time was editor of the Tribune, his passed since, but the Jones family owned the Tribune. And took this interviewing class, and Jenk was like, yeah, this kid has talent. So he said, I want you to be an intern. And I think, probably the person who hired interns wasn't thrilled. Jenk said, bring in this kind of rough kid, but she's got some talent. And then he told me, he said, yeah, we'll hire you when you graduate. So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
Even the school newspaper back then, because there was no social media, that's where you actually got all the scoop on everything.
Yeah.
That was a big deal, in college. And then for the Tribune.
Well, and if I would never have applied to be the editor if the journalism teachers, I realized later, so many things in your life, you look back and you think, oh, that's what was happening. I didn't know it at the time, but they clearly had kind of gotten together and said, oh yeah, this is who we want to be the editor. And they, pulled me into applying, and then I was selected as the editor to my
right out of college, an editor or late or after?
That was when the newspaper in college.
Oh, the college paper. Yeah. Okay.
And then but then kind of the same thing, as I became a newspaper reporter. So so that was my first professional job outside of college.
And how long were you at the paper?
5 years roughly. Worked in Tulsa, covered City Hall. I was a City Hall reporter, an education reporter. Yeah. It all circles back. And then went to DC. They used to have a rotating DC assignment, and went to DC for a year. You would do it for a year, and then got the bug for DC and quit after my year was up, and then went back to DC and worked for a couple years for the Newspaper Association of America.
Oh.
And then meanwhile, the Tribune folded. And I came back.
Well, they needed you.
Yeah, exactly. I had a point in life. I mean, being in the newspaper business, this happens, where like the last 3 places I had applied were all out of business. It was like the Tulsa Tribune, the Newspaper Association eventually kind of went defunct. And then I came back to Tulsa to become editor for the Sentinel, which was a weekly newspaper the Jones family started after the Tribune closed. Also closed after 9 months. So I was like, I was awesome at these last 3 jobs. Seriously, none of those people are there anymore. But it's not because of me.
Yeah, right. Oh my goodness.
But yeah, it's an industry that there's not a lot left. So.
Yes, the industry definitely folding. But you were at the right place at the right time.
Yeah,
Like.
And there could not have been a better beginning than for so many things, honestly, than a daily newspaper. And the Tribune was an evening newspaper. So my first deadline was 9 a.m. So you would go into a city commission, then it was city commission meeting, take these notes, quickly jot down a story, and then I'd go to the pay phones that they had for the reporters, and you would dictate a story that would be on the front page, an hour later. So that thinking on your feet and being able to move quickly and sort of really get to it, everybody should work for 6 months at least for a daily afternoon newspaper, and it'll make you better at everything you do.
Oh, that's absolutely. So I took the television route, but same thing, journalism, and the news is going on at 5 whether you're ready or not. And I love to I've hired people from news because the deadlines are insane, and you have to think on your feet. You have got to get it out. It doesn't matter. Your story fell through, you have to have a second one. It's got to be like ready to go. So I love that mentality because I think that's hard to teach today. I mean, there's not many jobs that are under the gun and deadline like that. So that was a great start for you. So when did you get into the nonprofit world? Because Up With Trees and Child Abuse Network, some major nonprofits that you've been a CEO of.
I did community after the newspapers folded. I went and worked for the city then, did communications for the city, and then had my son and decided I wanted to freelance and work from home. And then while I was working from home, had my daughter and got involved. I was involved in neighborhood association and some community things, and did some consulting, wrote brochures and things for some candidates. So kind of had my finger in things, and was frustrated by some stuff that I saw happening in the city. Saw some Democrat woman, didn't know her, was running for mayor. And I thought, well, that's cool. I would support, a Democrat woman. That's awesome. Yeah. And a good friend of mine who'd been at the Tribune, Jim East, was her campaign manager. So I called Jim and said, hey, can I I've been working from home, but can I volunteer in this campaign or something? And he said, yeah, can you come tomorrow and can you drive? I'll introduce you to Kathy. That was Kathy Taylor, obviously. And can you drive her around tomorrow? And I said, okay, sure. And so I went and I drove her around to campaign things, met Kathy and talked to her. And he called me at the end of the day and he says, I don't know what you did, but he says, she really likes sleep. Can you come work in the campaign? And I really had no intent to get involved again.
Your kids are little at this point?
Yeah, 5 and 3 at the time. And so it was like this, I tell people it's like this black hole that kind of just sucked you in, all of a sudden it's like, 60 hours a week working in this campaign.
For sure.
And then she won, and I went and worked in the mayor's office with her, which was great. And we have stayed good friends and worked together multiple different incarnations over the years. But my kids were little, and I remember, in fact, the day that she won, the next day, my mom at the time was living with us and had taken my kids, was just dealing with everything with my kids. And I was lying in bed with my then 3-year-old daughter, and I said, Mommy's going to be able to take you to gymnastics today. And she was so excited. And I get a phone call from the campaign manager, and she says, Kathy's in City Hall. I need you there now. She's like going floor to floor, like you need. So I was like, how to say to my 3-year-old, I'm sorry. And then I joined her office and worked there, and I sort of hate this story in a way because I should not have felt guilty, and I don't want anyone else to feel guilty. But I mean, it was insane that first year. And I've been working these crazy hours, just really long hours. And I came home one afternoon, and my son comes up to the car, and I know this was not true, really. But he comes up and he's like, and he's, sniffling, and he's like, today was specials day. And which was when you were supposed to come and see like the art and all the special things. Music, and they had little things presented, and all the moms, but you were there. And I know all the moms weren't there, and I'm there a whole lot. And all those things, you can tell yourself all those things. I just started bawling. I mean, I'm sitting in my car in my driveway, and I was like, I don't want to be doing this yet. I don't want to be working this level now. And, so I talked to Kathy, and kind of meanwhile, somebody I had not at all even thought about nonprofit world, but a friend of mine had been the director there, and she called me and she said she had moved to do something else. And she said, you'd be awesome at this. You really should do this. I was like, and I thought, oh man, is Kathy going to be, mad? Am I betraying her? And she was so great and so supportive, and just said, nah. And her attitude has always been, and it's something I've really tried to model with people who work for me, is like, that's just more of my team out there in the world. Like the more people who are part of this, who spread and do other things, the easier that work becomes. And in fact, I went and became the director at Up With Trees. Almost exactly a year later, we had that big ice storm, and devastating 2007 ice storm. And Kathy called me and said, we lost so many trees across the city. She said, what are we going to do? And the fact that I was at Up With Trees and she was the mayor, we were able to work together and launch Regreen Tulsa, we called it, and raise $3 million to plant. Yeah. I mean, the most
I remember that
nationally renowned program for response after a disaster, and absolutely happened because we were both where we were, and because she was so supportive in seeing people go out and become allies in the world, instead of seeing that as, some sort of betrayal. It's like, oh no, yeah. Let's spread, the people who we know we can work with, get as many as you can around the city. So.
Absolutely. I can see you two being a powerhouse together. That is for sure. So 2 women that you can't stop.
Yeah. It was a good program. And we've been able, like I said, in fact, we were walking this morning and have a business meeting here in a few hours with Kathy again. That. So lots of the path have crossed in so many ways, and we've kept the friendship too, which is great.
Yeah, that's so fun. I love that. Well, what do you think makes a good leader? You've been in different leadership positions over the years, and what would you say makes a good leader? For me, this is going to probably sound counterintuitive, but I think one of the things that has helped me be most successful as a leader is being willing to look dumb. And by that I mean being willing to ask what feels like a dumb question. I have been brought in multiple times, and I guess I kind of got a reputation for being somebody who was good at change, and good at if somebody felt like, hey, we need something new to happen here. But so many times I have walked into a new role or just a new problem that someone's asked me to help solve, and you think, gosh, this really feels like everybody's going in the wrong direction here. But you second guess yourself. These are smart people. They care. I'm not the only person who cares about this issue. If they all think that's the right direction, it's probably the right direction, right? And so much of the time I have found being willing to say, hey, why are we going this way again? Can we all talk it through? And you'll find a lot of people in that room are thinking the same thing. And it's not because they're weak. It's not because they're scared. In some ways, it's because they're doing the same thing you are, which is trusting that everybody else in the room knows what they're doing. And so I think Mayor Bynum, I worked for Mayor Bynum, and he said to me one time after a meeting where something had been presented, and this is, again, a group of this is his management team, really smart, capable, caring people. And somebody presented something, and you're like, I think that's not right. And I ended up asking some questions that pushed kind of hard, and then everybody asked the questions. And he came up to me afterward, and he said, and he meant this as a compliment, and I took it as a compliment. And he said, thank you for being the person who's always willing to ask the question that allows the rest of us to be curmudgeonly. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a big part of it, being willing to do that. I think being willing to listen and change yourself as well. Not just, I think early on as a leader, when I had some authority, I thought strength was asserting that authority.
And sometimes it is, and sometimes you have to do that, and you've got to be willing to do that sometimes and deal with the consequences, but also to listen and learn. And, I have absolutely had people kind of, do that same thing to me. Why are we going this direction again? And you got to be willing to be on both sides of that. And I'll say in my current role as a department director, which is, the biggest group by far that I've led, the open door thing, but I mean, really meaning that. When I started as parks director, I have about 12 different work sites, and I went to every one of those work sites and talked to the people and met them and, told them a little bit about what my goals were, but really emphasized, hey, I work for you. If you've got issues, come talk to me. And so my first couple of weeks, I had a couple people, and they're like, yeah, I need to meet with you. And I was like, oh no, this is going to be like some whistleblower thing. It's going to be some nightmare. And it wasn't at all. It was just like frontline people who had good ideas. My playground inspector, this blue collar guy who'd been doing it for years, he came in and he had this yellow notepad with all these handwritten notes. But basically he wanted me to understand that the way that the muckety mucks were bidding playgrounds was wrong, and that we had these dumb specs that were eliminating a bunch of bidders, making us pay more. And he was right.
Wow.
And my chief horticulturist wanted me to understand about, they were making her buy plants the wrong time of year and in the wrong quantities to get the right plants. And so I was able to have both of them sit down with our purchasing director and really explain this and get some changes made. So I think being genuine in that, listening to people, and I think that really has made a difference.
You might have been the only one that has listened. I mean, they might have had that knowledge for years and no one took the time.
I mean, people told me that they said, I tried to tell someone this last year, but everybody, just poo-pooed it. I think that it's definitely, we talked about, I've had all these different roles in cities, so it's pretty unusual. I've been like I was a frontline type worker working in communications in my first incarnation, and I've worked on the mayor's team and as a department head and as a city councilor, and that's really helped me understand all those roles. And I think the key is respect all those roles. I mean, I now oversee guys who have to go literally clean up crap. Yeah. I mean, they clean up these bathrooms that have been vandalized that are just disgusting, and they have to do that every day. And I oversee people who run the PAC and the BOK arena, and I couldn't do either of their jobs. They couldn't do each other's jobs. And so you really have to genuinely understand and respect what those people bring to the table, and be willing to listen to them when they come and talk to you about changing things. And I think they'd probably tell you in the department head meetings that it's made me kind of more of a pain sometimes, because my department really is. Most of the people in parks do not have offices. They either work out in the field or they work in a rec center where they have shared resources. They don't have individual computers. They don't have, almost nobody has desk phones. I don't have a desk phone even. People use cell phones or, shared resources. And yet the city still, for example, it's benefits time. We're going to send out an email, and here's the link to your portal, and read your benefit. And they're going to open this on a phone and never click on it. And so I have to really push back and advocate. And also, there aren't a lot of people at my level, honestly, who have lived, been at a level of poverty where, one broken down car means you might lose your job, or understanding what it means to be somebody who makes, $16 an hour, which we've now bumped it up some. But I mean, I had people making $15 an hour who were, employee. I found out in the last year that one of my employees was homeless, had been employed 8 years working for the city, and was living in a shelter. And we only found that out because during the ice storm, this person asked if they could get a ride to work because their car wasn't reliable enough to drive. And the person who picked them up at a shelter. So there are the needs of that employee are really, really different than the needs of somebody who's running a department. And I see it as really important to advocate for all of them.
Absolutely. Well, the empathy you have, you can hear it in your voice, which is incredible. So 350 people, right, on your team?
Yeah, Parks is just a little bit over 100, and then I also oversee the asset management department, which is takes care of all the buildings and things like that, and then also am the contract manager for most of our what we managed entities, but these partnerships, so the BOK, the Convention Center, the PAC, Gilcrease, the Zoo. I don't manage those directly. We've got wonderful teams in place who manage all those, but I work with whoever the contract is with, the director. And
so that's your direct reports, all the people that are running those.
Yeah. I mean, technically they don't, like the Gilcrease director, he actually works for TU, but I work with them and support them. They work through me when they have issues with the city, and it's great because it's all the fun stuff. And then we brought into the department over this past year what we call CABS. It's City Architectural Building Services, but they do all the vertical building for the city. So all the parks construction, but also the PAC, Gilcrease, the zinc dam, anything that is not pipes and streets. This group oversees the construction. So really, we get to do all the fun stuff in the city. So,
and there's been so many great things, like over the last 10 years, insane, even the last few years. So what's been your favorite project that you've worked on?
Oh gosh, there's so many cool ones. I love Hope Playground, which is the playground at Whiteside Park, and it was when we built it, our first and at the time the biggest and best in the state inclusive playground. Very generous grant from the Bernstein Family Foundation. They've been great supporters, and we worked really intensely with some folks here we found who have disabled children, who helped us really make that a really good success. And we've since built two others. That's in kind of Midtown. We built one with the support of the Bernstein Foundation in East Tulsa and West Tulsa. And we'll be there helping fund some in our projects we're doing in North Tulsa. And a couple of things on that project that really stood out to me. I had a woman here who is a disability advocate. She's got an adult disabled daughter, heavily disabled, and she's fought her daughter's whole life for better access, and has become, I wouldn't say was bitter, but she might tell you she's bitter. But I mean, somebody who's just, that's a heavy burden.
It's hard.
And she's fought hard her whole life. And she had sent these various complaints through various channels. I had never met her, to the park department, and just saying, here's all the things you're doing wrong. And she was right. I mean, the city has not done a good job at keeping up with disability requirements. And I reached out to her and I said, look, we want to do better. I want you to help us figure out how to do better. And I told her about her daughter's too old to be on the playground, but I said, can you go to Hope Playground? I want you to see at least where our heart is, and then help us figure out how to get the rest of it, caught up with the heart. And she went and she emails me, and I'm reading this email, and she said, I went to the playground and I sat in my car and I looked, and I didn't see any kids with disabilities playing. And my heart just sunk. And I thought, I had such high hopes. And then her next line is she said, because they weren't separated, they were playing together. And I realized, that these kids were all together, and kids with who were fully abled and kids who were disabled, wheelchair users or others, were playing together. And she helped us form an advisory committee that is, we're not doing nearly as much as we could or should, but is making a difference. So it's things like that. We had at a park board meeting, our true sign of success, we had a person whose house backs to Whiteside Park come to park board to complain at the public comments section. And he said, I go out in my backyard. I said, anytime I just hear the scream and laughter of kids playing. And he wanted park board to limit the hours, put a curfew on this playground so he wouldn't have to hear kids on the playground. And this whole room, you could see the whole room kind of is like, what? And he looks and he's like, I'm not a curmudgeon. Yeah. We're like, you actually are a curmudgeon here. You are the definition. But we're all like, okay, we've nailed this playground. If people are complaining about too many kids playing.
Oh my gosh, that's so great. So you have 4 of those in
we
town?
have 3 right now, and they're funding. We're at the Barry Chamberlain projects. Bernstein Foundation is also participating in the playgrounds there. And then we tried to make all playgrounds more inclusive, but these are really big, special ones. So at Bales, Hicks, Whiteside, we will be doing a similar playground as part of the Johnson Park renovation that'll be happening. So I think it's really opened our eyes around accessibility, that, you know, there's what is required by law, which is important, but sometimes honestly doesn't make it that much more accessible. And then there's just thinking through, talking to people who are actually users and realizing sometimes you can do things that aren't required, that don't cost you any more money. And maybe it's using different colors on the steps, and that helps somebody with visual disabilities distinguish the depth a little bit better. And it just looks like it's more fun. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't hurt anybody else. It doesn't make it less accessible for anybody else. So we've really tried to learn from this group as well on how we can do that across the board. And we've had them talk, you know, not just on park projects, but to our communications department on what we can do in city communications, and, you know, how we can all be more thoughtful, and how we try to make everything we do accessible to as many people as possible.
Well, you're an incredible advocate, so thank you for that. So what, all these hats that you've worn and all this experience that you've had, what advice would you give your younger self?
Man, you know, it's interesting because when I think back on my younger self, it's not like it's me. It's like I feel like I'm watching a movie almost. And I look at this and I'm like, oh my God, look at that poor thing. Look at her. Look at that terrible perm. Oh my God. I would probably give myself that advice.
Yeah.
Lose the perm way earlier, man. I see a few pictures of myself and it's like, oh, ouch. I would say a couple of things. You know, I have been incredibly fortunate that I've always been able to do something that I care about. And I would give this advice to anybody at any age. So whether that was my younger self, or a woman or a man, but, you know, at any age, and say, and you don't always have that luxury. Sometimes you do what you got to do because you got to pay a bill. But as quickly as you can, find that space where what you're doing matters to you, whatever that is. Because that's going to make such a difference. That, I think, is a big part of why I have been successful, is that I was doing something that I cared about, and I was willing to then step up when I saw something. It's like, oh, I literally, this is the kind of person I am. The first day when my son, who's my oldest, started kindergarten, and we walked in the school and they had some kind of registration thing, and the tables were clearly on the wrong side, and people would walk in and kind of run into each other and get in each other's way, and they were confused. And, you know, so you're like, you know, if we switch these tables, it'd be way better. And they're like, yeah. It was like, okay, I'll hold this in. You hold that in. And, you know, you could tell they're kind of like, but we did it. And a whole lot of things in my life have basically been that. It's like, that thing matters to me. It's not getting done. I think I can do it. And don't wait to be asked, and be willing to step up and do that. And I'll put a caveat there. That doesn't mean say yes to everybody else, because so often as women, competent women, I think, are way over asked to take on tasks, and then we do, and we often don't get credit for it. And, you know, we said in that meeting when somebody else gets praised for work that we did, but do say yes to yourself. When you see a thing and it matters to you and you know you can do it, and fixing that is going to make your life better, or your job better, or what you care about better. You know, there's a real shortage of competent people who are willing to step up and do things. So be one of those people, and you're going to be more successful and have more fun. And I think I would give that sad 15-year-old me with the bad hair, just say, man, you're pretty awesome, and you're going to get to do so many fun things, and some sucky things, but a lot of fun things too. So just hang in there.
That's right. I love that. So the whole premise of the podcast is do it my way, which is basically not following the path of everybody else. And I think that definitely fits in with you. You know, mine ended up being, I was in the corporate world, and then I became an an entrepreneur because I had a son born really early, kind of threw my world upside down. And so in order to do it my way, it was becoming an entrepreneur and going that path so I could also take care of my son, but still be, make money and provide for the family and all of that. So in what way in your life have you done it your way?
I'd say going back to that, just picking things that I really cared about and not ever, there were times when, if I was after all the newspapers closed and looking for a job, I would have taken something that was maybe less worthy if I'd had to, but I've never had to. And there's a point at which you sort of pass and you realize, oh, I'm not actually going to ever have to, that you have enough choices. And probably you always had those choices, you just didn't know it. But I think that waking up to realizing I get to every single day. Now that doesn't mean I don't get frustrated or, gripe. But I get to choose to do a thing that matters to me and to try to do it well. And if there's a day that what I'm doing doesn't matter to me in the same way, not a day that I'm not frustrated because I get frustrated or that I have setbacks. That happens. But a day that I think this doesn't matter, then I don't have to do it. And knowing that has just allowed me to take these big zigzaggy changes that I didn't necessarily expect or plan for, but felt like so completely right when I did them, because you could up with trees. I had not thought about nonprofit. I had really no background in trees. I cared about green stuff, I cared about all these other things. But when that opportunity presented itself and you're like, that feels really right. And that's a choice that I can really just believe in and care about. And everything has been that way. So I would say for me, it's that, something that I've looked at as a luxury, but maybe was really an active choice all along.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. Well, so what's next for Anna America? You've done
knows?
So much.
If you had asked me at any time in my career, what do you be doing 5 years from now? I don't think I ever would have been even close on my predictions. So I maybe I'll be doing the same thing. Maybe I'll be doing something completely different. I think that it will, it'll be something that I care about. I know that. And I really have just been amazingly blessed. I know that I have gotten to do what legacy type things. There's things, this playground, or there's things all around town that I've gotten to be a part of. So I don't feel a need to do big things. And I've done the things I'm probably proudest of are these like boring bureaucratic things like internal. When I was a counselor, I had a lot of small businesses that were losing business because of road construction, and it was really hard for them.
Oh, yeah.
And so I went and kind of worked with Public Works and got them to make all these changes on improving access. And every time I drive by a construction site and I see those business, business entrance signs, and I get a little like, I help do that.
Yeah,
and
that's
so
a big
boring,
deal.
Yeah, but it's
really big deal.
You don't get your name on it. You don't get whatever. I 2 charter change things that I did that are, again, just bureaucratic kind of cleanup things, changing how we do partisan, when we do redistricting, that it's nonpartisan instead of a political process. And so a lot of things like that. So it's nice to know that I don't feel like I have to go prove anything, I can do.
You've done there. You've been there and done that. And you have left an amazing legacy. So, Tulsa is very fortunate to have you. And I appreciate you coming on and sharing everything. Very interesting. I've loved hearing all your stories about just making a huge difference.
It was a pleasure and it's an honor. You've had so many great guests. So just being among that group is a thrill for me.
Well, thank you for being on. Thank you for listening to the Do It My Way podcast. If you're wanting to build a personal brand, but you aren't sure where to start, I want you to book a discovery call with me at deidredetterman.com. I hope you are empowered today to do business on your terms with no regrets, hesitation, or fear. Again, head over to deidredetterman.com and click on Get a Quote.